Appreciate everyone being here. And Christina, I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, super excited to be here.
We've known each other for quite a while, but I think for the audience it would be helpful. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and what you're currently working on at Apollo.
Yeah, sure. So, by the way, super pumped. Everybody, hang on. It's going to be a great panel. I know that drinks, we're standing in between you guys and drinks. So, I've been in the digital asset space for about 8 years now, focused on real-world assets tokenization the whole time. So, currently, I'm at Apollo, which is a little bit over $500 billion asset manager, leading digital asset strategy. Our digital asset strategy is twofold. First, we are investing in early stage companies and projects. And then the other part is actually getting hands-on with the technology, figuring out how tokenization will impact asset management at large, what financial markets infrastructure for TradFi will look like, and what we need to do about that and get mobilized for it and how we can actually take advantage of that. Additionally, outside the realm of digital assets, I look after data strategy and co-lead AI strategy. That's kind of interesting. I actually think that AI and digital assets go together like peanut butter and jelly. It's like, kind of tech stack of the future. So definitely excited to share a little bit more about that.
So you've been working on tokenization, and I guess we're calling it real-world assets now. That's the buzz phrase.
We're calling it.
Yeah.
I actually came to get the update on what the narrative were and what people were talking about.
But you've been working in this space now for quite a while. So I'm curious what you're seeing today. What's changed over the 8 years that you've been working on this? What are you excited about today? And then where do you see this headed in the future?
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of see how this space has evolved in the past 8 years. So, when I first started, this is kind of like when the only blockchains that existed were Bitcoin. And so we were talking about doing things with colored coins. I don't know if anyone here's ever tried to work with that. We were thinking we're doing colored coin things, and Ethereum had just launched, and we were super excited about smart contracts. We went through a phase of blockchain, not Bitcoin, and there was rapid development of enterprise-specific distributed ledgers, many of which, I've had their heyday, but maybe less popular and maybe not even in existence anymore today. Then from, okay, what blockchain or distributed ledger should we build on? We went forth to actually figure out, how would we actually put these assets on chain? Fun fact is, when I first started in digital assets, I actually built and led JP Morgan's digital asset program. So if you've heard of Onyx by JP Morgan, if you've heard about JP Morgan tokenizing over $1 trillion of tokenized treasuries in US dollars, I built that, right? So basically we started with tokenizing bonds and tokenizing dollars. But the crazy thing is that, from a TradFi point of view, we were literally okay, a bond looks like this. It's got it's either fixed or floating rate. It's got a maturity of a year. Wait, a blockchain doesn't have a calendar. We have to build a calendar onto a blockchain. A bond has a global holiday schedule. There's the European holiday schedule and the US holiday schedule. We got to build the holiday schedules into this bond math. It was not until DeFi emerged, DeFi summer, where we realized, actually, we've been thinking about it the wrong way. We've been thinking about lifting and dropping our existing TradFi instruments onto blockchain. But in reality, the way the technology works, what it really lends itself is to actually create new products, interests accrued over block time, not over days and not paid in months and quarters. No holiday schedule, 24/7, 365, right? So these were kind of new developments that, we ended up learning over time. I would say the key takeaways or the key lessons from that, sort of evolution are a fewfold. The first thing is that, we definitely need to move away from infrastructure and focus on, real value driving use cases. We definitely invested a lot of time on infrastructure, and I feel, very grateful that we did both in the permissionless and the permission space. I would say that with TradFi's enthusiasm and discovery energy and resources now pointed at AI, in order for digital assets to really, emerge it really has to, create business value. And I think we all have hypotheses on, where this is. But, just saying, throwing it on a blockchain, saying we're going to tokenize this, like, is not going to be good enough, right? Like, people are done experimenting with digital assets. People are like, okay, I got this. Just tell me where it's going to add value to my business. Like, they've sort of deployed the, discovery, innovation dollars towards AI at this point. The second thing is, I think permissionless and permissioned blockchains will coexist. I think this is like controversial statement, but I used to be like the queen of permission blockchain, so I can say that. I think that there will be different use cases, different networks that will require permissioned or permissionless. I mean, a little known fact that I recently learned is, in the context of telecom, like think like, a telecom company like Verizon, there are, first of all, multiple different networks around the world, right? Like, when you go to Europe with your iPhone, like, you're not using your Verizon network, you're using some like local European network. Your iPhone still works, like you have to pay for it, but like you're basically moving from one network to another. And then also for specialized use cases, like, for example, extremely secretive control communications in an NFL stadium, like that's a permission network as opposed to like a large permissionless like cell network. And so similarly, especially when it comes to transferring money, not just information, you're going to have some use cases that are more secure, more contained, more permissioned, and some that are more permissionless. And hopefully with all the different blockchain network and protocols that exist today, you're going to seamlessly travel from one to another, without some of the hokey wallet login, log out stuff that we have today.
So you're actually seeing, I guess, right now, people embracing more of the, I guess I'd say, permissionless, non-enterprise blockchain side of things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bifurcation on the traditional finance side. There's a clear advantage to using permissionless networks. I mean, first of all, like if it's a permission network, someone has to run the network. There's costs, like someone has to make sure there's, continued uptime on that. I think when you have a permissionless network with, that is broadly distributed, then the costs of running that network are distributed. And so, you don't have the primary cost. Like when you guys are doing stuff on, any layer 1 or layer 2, you don't think like, how much is it really for me to run these nodes? Like you're just using it, you're deploying your smart contracts, you have like a network that you can distribute your application to. You have a ready audience without having that infrastructure cost because the infrastructure cost has been mutualized across all of the different participants in the network. So similarly, I think that there's benefits in permissionless protocols in that you have sort of this parallelized like R&D and development. The fact that in a permissionless network, you can have like, tens, if not 50 or so, or hundreds of teams working on multiple different things on the same protocol. Whereas, if you're talking about like a permission network, you're kind of working on like a sequential basis, like, one project after another. At most, maybe you're running 2 or 3 projects, like if you're like one team on a permissionless network. So I would say that the scale of speed of innovation is also much faster on a permissionless network because you're just going to have random ass people that are building stuff that may not make sense to you in TradFi, but actually are important components that you didn't think of, but could be useful later.
So I want to get back to that in 1 second, but I think we were talking about this backstage. I think being in the industry for so long, I've been somewhat of a skeptic of RWAs and the adoption that we're going to see there. And I think a lot of it makes sense. But I think when you speak to people still today in TradFi, the pushback you get is, why? Everything works fine. Like, why do we need to change anything? The systems we have, we're okay with those. So I'm curious from your point of view, what are the actual benefits? If we were to sit here today and say tokenization, RWAs, this big trend, towards this, what problems are you solving? And then what opportunities are you creating?
Yeah, I agree. I think in like real world assets tokenization, I think because there's been so much fragmentation in many different traditional finance points of views, the story is not really straight yet on what the key benefits have been. I mean, of course, you have I mean, I think the key benefits that everyone likes to say is, well, you have DVP settlement. First of all, I don't think anyone really knew about like DVP settlement, cared that much about it until they started trying to pitch it. So DVP settlement means like you're not sending the asset unless you're getting like the cash leg to, simultaneously. Again, you like see no one cares here, right? But you have DVP settlement. You have the ability to basically make any asset collateralized. You can do instantaneous and like real-time things that you weren't able to do before. I think we demonstrated this with, for example, building intraday repo at JP Morgan. Repo markets, the biggest market that most people haven't heard of or think about or care about, counted in the trillions across broker-dealers and banks, mostly an overnight market or, a market counted in days. Definitely not something that you could do intraday because it has two legs. It has like the US dollar leg and it has like some sort of collateralized security leg. Let's call it a tokenized treasury or a treasury leg. And each of those instruments have different settlement systems. So to do something, first of all, overnight and like multiple day settlement is hard. And then when you do intraday, you're basically putting two different instruments with two different settlement systems together in one. And that's something that, can more easily be coordinated with smart contracts. So basically what we did was use blockchain as like a subledger on US dollar systems and treasury systems. And then you could use smart contracts to affect the instantaneous settlement and to basically, like settle something, like basically count a repo in minutes, let alone like days. But in terms of like what I see to be the emerging benefits, like, I think when you see US dollar, or you see stable coins in general, they don't even have to be US dollars. You see stable coins and you see how they're used today. You see that it's 24/7, 365, that you have like, very transparent, confirmed settlements, through a block explorer. Like, that is a clear differentiator than, traditional bank-enabled cross-border payments. Where, if I want to make a cross-border payment to you, I have to, figure out a way to instruct my bank, like whether that be, pressing some buttons on like some sort of interface, which actually isn't super clear. I need to type in like all of these like wire instructions or get like a banker to actually instruct the payment. Then they like confirm something and then it's like lost in space. And then I need to like go call back and be like, hey, did this wire actually get received? Like, did you get what I sent you? Like, you don't have any of that in, basically blockchain-based stablecoin payments. Now, I think what teams like Franklin Templeton and BlackRock and Wisdom Tree have done, like, is sort of like build the next layer. So stablecoins, like, clear use case there. Now they're building the next layer of what I consider stablecoin alternatives, like basically yielding stablecoins, but just in the form of treasuries and money market funds that are yielding now 5% in this market. I mean, over time, like if you have the ease of use with stable coins and you're able to put it into a yielding instrument, essentially like where you get to is a world where I can have my checking account in like yielding assets all the time. I don't have to like fumble around and figure out like, oh, how much do I have to keep in like US dollars in my check? I don't know if anyone else does this, but I definitely do as like even like an old finance person. Like, how much do I need to keep in my checking account in US dollars as liquid to pay, my monthly expenses? And then I'm going to move the rest to like, move some into like some 5% treasury fund, which by the way, in itself, like I have to instruct someone to do that trade and do a confirmation. It's not like an easy one-click button situation. And then let alone like, work on my investments. Where we're going to ultimately get to is, listen, here are your assets, either in your checking or your savings account. AI is going to like know what are your spending behaviors, like what your risk profile is. It's going to design a portfolio of assets, like some of it being liquid US dollar stablecoin, some of it being semi-liquid or mostly liquid treasuries, risk-free, and some of it being longer-term, higher-yielding assets, perhaps Apollo assets at 9 or 10% at these days. And be able to just automatically rebalance your checking account to make sure that you're optimizing your yield on your earnings without you really having to do anything about it. And like, actually, you could actually make the whole thing yielding. And when you go to buy a coffee or when you go to buy your Masari mainnet ticket, that's like an automatic swap from your yielding asset to your USD. That gets paid to the vendor. And you didn't even have to think about it. You didn't have to press more than like one button, which is I want to pay for this out of my account that is yielding 9% with Apollo product. So, I mean, that is the future state of, where could be like a business use case for people. It's going to be convenience, and it's going to be, kind of the democratization of higher order investments, kind of that would be more automated, more, sort of, I guess, user friendly for people.
All right. Maybe I'm convinced now. You said a magic word in there, though. I think one thing interesting about this conversation is you work on both crypto and AI. And you mentioned AI being a part of this future you see for tokenized assets. So I know that's been a big area. It's been a big trend this year for crypto in general. We've talked a lot about the crossover between crypto and AI. I'm curious from your perspective, coming from somebody that is at a large institution that is focused on these two things, where do you see that intersection being real between crypto and AI?
Yeah, sure. I think in the very near term, I think that generative AI can create a lot of capacity for smart contract-based applications. What I mean by that is, I think, especially as someone who's been building applications for years, it's like, okay, like, we're going to build on this blockchain. We need smart contract devs that like know this language. Where are the devs? How are we going to get them? And undoubtedly, they're all doing something much cooler than working at a bank or a TradFi like company, right? I would say with the advent of generative AI, it essentially, because it's so good at A, translating different languages, B, coding and translating between human language and machine language, translating between different machine languages, there's the opportunity to open up a lot of like smart contract development capacity that has, been kind of locked down with a small, like, sort of set of developers, currently, right? So, basically it makes blockchains more accessible. It makes smart contract applications more accessible. Like your in-house bank Java developer doesn't need to like drop everything to learn Solidity or whatever language. Like they can just translate their Java thoughts into Solidity as an example. Even like over time with the power of generative AI, you could have like a product manager start like developing smart contract apps. And I'm sure there'll be like sort of Squarespace type things that will emerge for blockchain like that. In the medium term, right now, as I mentioned, like most institutions are like kind of trying to figure out generative AI, and they're deploying resources and they're investing in it, but there's not much yet at production at scale. But, actually running generative AI, very expensive from a compute resources perspective, right? And what is going to emerge, or what has already started to emerge, is this idea of you will have like a spectrum of language models. You have a spectrum of large language models, which exist today, like the OpenAIs, Anthropics, like, Cohere, et cetera. And you'll even like start having like more purpose-specific small language models, like sort of like basic, domain-specific, lighter, easier, faster. And so what you end up having is like a team of bots. Some that will be like really great at reasoning. Some that will be those will be very heavy in compute. But then some that will be like very lightweight and cheap and easy and fast. You need a way to get them organized so that you don't have the super expensive advanced generative large language model doing like the basic math or admin, process. You need some sort of economic model to distribute the work so that you have the lower cost AI bots doing like the easy work, and you have like the expensive, kind of more advanced, bots doing the advanced work and sort of quarterbacking and delegating, to the team of lighter bots. And in order for bots to know that, or to have that reasonable delegation, they essentially just need to know, like, what is your budget? And like, whatever I'm doing here is like much cheaper than, what you're doing over there. And therefore we will just use math to actually like delegate this appropriately. In the same way that a team would have a budget and you would say like, okay, I have like my onshore developers here, I've got my offshore developers here, this is how we're going to divide the work. You're going to basically have that with a team of AI bots. And they're going to make micropayments to each other. They're not going to send wires.
I hope not.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much. That was very insightful. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.